the covert narcissist's go-to form of abuse is passive-aggressive. But not everybody who's passive-aggressive is a covert narcissist. So in this video, we're going to talk all about passive aggression, what it is, common passive-aggressive behaviors, and why people may act passive-aggressively even if they're not narcissists. And this topic I think is important not just for identifying passive-aggressive behaviors in ourselves and changing them, but for understanding why other people may act in ways that are passive-aggressive towards us. So if you're ready, let's jump into it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, its connection with spirituality, and we attempt to answer the question, where do we go from here? So if that all sounds good, like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you can be notified whenever I post new videos. So today we're talking all about passive-aggressive behavior. And again, whenever I talk about something that is passive-aggressive, there's always going to be somebody who's going to come into the comments and say, wait a second, I do that. Am I a narcissist? And the answer is, well, I can't tell you if you're a narcissist or not, but just because you do that does not make you a narcissist. That is not how narcissism is diagnosed. The thing that gets confusing is that covert narcissists are so often passive-aggressive, extremely passive-aggressive, to the point where you may not even know that they're being aggressive until much later. But they're not the only ones. They're far from the only ones who are passive-aggressive. I myself have acted in ways that were passive-aggressive, and you probably have too. So today we're talking about that. We're talking about common passive-aggressive behaviors. You may identify with one or two of them, or maybe more, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're a narcissist. So if you do identify with any of these, the good news is that if you're not a narcissist, it should be relatively easy for you to correct that. As with anything, it's always going to be a process, but the ability to change is always going to be a blessing. We can always learn and grow. So what is considered passive-aggressive? Someone's being passive-aggressive when they're angry, and they want you to know they're angry, but they don't want to tell you. So they work in roundabout ways to make you feel bad because they're angry with you and they feel bad and they want you to feel bad. And as we go through the list of common passive-aggressive behaviors, you're going to see that they are actually pretty common in our society. And are they narcissistic? Most likely, yes. If you want somebody to know that you're mad or upset or that something's bothering you, but you don't want to actually outright tell them, you want them to figure it out. You kind of want them to cater to you. That's a very narcissistic way of handling any problem. So it is narcissistic, and maybe that's why covert narcissists are so likely to use passive aggression against their targets. Okay, so first let's look at some of these common behaviors, and then we'll talk about where they come from and what to do about it. So the first common passive-aggressive behavior is stonewalling or silent treatment. Somebody is very angry and they don't want to talk to you at all. They just completely shut you out. You might get one-word answers if you're lucky, or you just get complete silence. A second common passive-aggressive behavior is deliberately stalling when you don't want to do something. So here's an example. You want to go somewhere and your partner doesn't. But instead of telling you that they don't want to go, they just drag their feet. You know, they take a really long time to get up off the couch and actually get ready. And then when they do get ready, there are all these problems, and it just takes a really long time for them to get showered and dressed and out the door. And so they end up making you late to the thing that they didn't want to go to in the first place. So this could serve two purposes. One, you could just say, well, we're already late, I'm not going to go. Let's just forget it. And another way this works out to the passive-aggressive person's benefit is that they don't have to spend as much time. Even if you do end up going, they don't have to spend as much time at this function that they didn't want to go to in the first place. So the third common passive-aggressive behavior is sarcasm. And we all know somebody who's just super sarcastic, right? And you may just think of it as their personality or just the way they are. But if you think about what sarcasm really is, it's a roundabout way of making your point. It's a way of saying something without actually saying it. In reality, you're saying the opposite of what you mean, and you're expecting the person to figure it out for themselves. So sometimes sarcasm is harmless, and sometimes it's really just mean. And it depends on the situation, but it's always kind of passive aggressive. So the fourth common passive aggressive behavior is botching a job just to get out of doing the work in the future. So if somebody hates doing the dishes and they are forced to do them and they just do a terrible job, or the laundry, or some job at work, and they just botch it, so the person who tasked them with doing the job ends up doing it themselves anyway. So it creates more work for the other person, and they just decide, next time I'll just do it myself. This is passive aggressive because instead of just saying, I don't want to do this, or I'm not very good at this, I hate this job, can we just compromise? Can I do something else instead? They're really just trying to get out of work. They're trying to make you make that decision instead of being upfront and just addressing it to begin with. So the fifth common passive aggressive behavior, and we talk about this with covert narcissists when we talk about lies of omission. This behavior is omitting important information that somebody could actually do something with, that somebody would do something with if they had known. So it could be something like, if you don't want somebody to go to a certain event, you don't tell them until the very, very last minute, and then say, oh, I thought I told you. Or when you're dealing with a narcissist, or if you're in a toxic relationship, this often presents as, something like, I hung out with my ex the other day and, oh, I thought I told you. But you know that you would have remembered that if they did. Or I have this thing coming up, I'm going out of town, I thought I told you. And another common passive aggressive behavior is the backhanded compliment. And now this one's particularly cruel. I don't suspect that most of you are guilty of this one, but it's essentially saying something nice followed by something mean, or vice versa. You're pretending to compliment somebody, but you're really actually putting them down. So the bottom line here is that passive aggressive behaviors, they're just plain bad. Sometimes they're downright cruel, like if you're making a joke at someone else's expense. But even if you're just simply trying to avoid confrontation and you're being passive aggressive, these behaviors are problematic. They're not productive because they stand in the way of healthy, open dialogue. So instead of avoiding the conflict and avoiding the problem, when you're avoiding the conflict, really you're also avoiding talking about the problem. You could actually be solving it. So passive aggressive behavior, sometimes it's super, super harmful, and sometimes people use it as a way to avoid confrontation, and they don't necessarily think they're hurting someone else. But it's never good because it's never going to address what's really going on. So why do we use passive aggressive behaviors ever if they're so non-productive? And there are a few reasons. If you are a covert narcissist, you're going to use passive aggressive behaviors because you do have a lot of pent up anger and you have bad feelings, and you actually don't have other people's best interests in mind. And most likely, a covert narcissist is going to use passive aggressive behaviors and tactics when they're actively devaluing a target. So they're thinking the worst about you and it's coming out, but they don't necessarily always want to tell you the worst. They don't want to tell you what's on their mind, but you'll see it come out in other ways, and they will let it slip in other ways that gives them plausible deniability. So one reason why someone who's not a narcissist might use passive aggressive behaviors is upbringing. If that's how you learned to deal with conflict when you were growing up, that's probably how you're going to deal with conflict as an adult. And the only time we really stop is when we realize that our behaviors are unhealthy or they're counterproductive. So another reason why people might exhibit passive aggressive behaviors is the fear of confrontation. So this is somebody who just does not want any sort of confrontation. So when a person like this is angry, there's only so much we can do to hide our anger, and it's going to come out in some way, and that way is going to appear very passive aggressive. And this person may not have bad intentions towards the person that they're angry with even, but they're still going to use this passive aggressive techniques because the alternative is to actually confront the situation, and they're afraid to do that. And the third reason people use passive aggressive behaviors, and this is the reason why they're not going anywhere anytime soon, is situational. So we've all been at work and dealt with somebody who really got under our skin, but maybe you're in a meeting and you can't say anything. Or if you're a customer service agent and somebody calls up and they're just really, really being awful to you. You do have a choice. You don't have to be passive aggressive, but there's only so much you can do to confront the situation. So oftentimes it will come out as their anger will come out in a passive aggressive way. Okay, so how do you deal with somebody who's being passive aggressive with you? And really the best way, there's one thing you can do, and that's call it out. Call out the behavior. Call out the passive aggression that they are exhibiting. If they're stonewalling you, call that out. This is what you're doing, and it is not productive. We have a problem here, and what you're doing is not going to solve it. If they're making backhanded compliments, call it out. Well, that almost sounded like a compliment, but it was actually an insult, wasn't it? The person who is exhibiting the passive aggressive behavior, what they're doing is really, they're trying to hide behind the behavior itself. So if you call it out, you're taking the power away from them. If nothing else, it will make them a little bit uncomfortable because they didn't get their way. They didn't get to follow through on that passive aggressive insult, or the stonewalling didn't have the desired effect. You're not giving them what they want, and eventually they may see a need to adjust their behavior. If you're dealing with a narcissist, that's not ever going to happen. But if you're dealing with someone else who just is acting in a way that's passive aggressive, and maybe they don't even realize how bad it is to act that way. But if you're dealing with somebody else who's acting passive aggressively, it may force them to see that what they're doing isn't working and they should try a more direct approach. So if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. And if you'd like to see more like it, subscribe, and I will see you next time.